on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. Let's move straight to the front pages of the dailies this morning. I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with Forex crisis. 2024 budget suffers major dislocations. Benchmark exchange rates now half of the value. Revenue expenditure estimate unrealistic. You see that story on page 5, and here there's a picture with a rider that says protesters marching against the arch economy in the country on the streets of Ibadan or your state yesterday. On page 14, electricity, Forex crisis, inflation push meter prices by 80%. On page 31, sports, 2025 AFCON, draw odds in Cairo today. On page 6, suspected and others invade 3 Benue local governments. Q10, injure others. Kidnappers abduct 9 passengers in Kogi, demand 30 million naira. Now on page 8, CH kicks against 17 trillion naira loss on tax waivers. On page 8, ECOWAS crisis, Gowon turns the federal government, ECOWAS invitation to speak on issues. Stories above the banner on page 19, 92% of Nigerian workers in informal employment. That's according to MBS. On page 29, Edo 2024, APC youth, women take over secretariat, one sack of SWC. I won APC primaries with over 6,000 votes, and that's coming from Okwebolo. And Jekiri storms of Ganduja's office, demands certificate of return. And on page 8, federal government cement manufacturers agree on 7,000 naira to 8,000 naira for 50 kg bag. And lastly on Vanguard, Wale Edu Cardoso SEC management team visit Wigwe Spirit. You can see that on page 15 of Vanguard newspaper. Now the Guardian is leading with road infrastructure development. Federal government grants a 4 trillion naira tax credit in 5 years. As inflation threatening scheme, you can see that on page 6. And on page 2, panic on OAU campus as lion kills zookeeper, injures another. EFCC grills Kwara ex-governor for alleged financial inti. Zulum sacks IDP camp boss for wash facilities diversion. And page 4, unemployment rate rose by 5% in third quarter of 2023, says MBS. Our insecurity, hunger threatening Nigeria's existence. You can see that on editorial page 42. And now the nation is leading with diversion of 10 billion naira. EFCC detains ex-Kwara governor Ahmed Zachariah slated for Ilorin. Is ready to take questions on his stewardship. You can see that on page 4. CJN MBA Ayeda Tiwa Estor Akeredolu court valedictory for ex-governor. You can see that on page 4. Why cement can't sell below 7,000 naira by manufacturers. That can be seen on page 3. No time to scrap LCDAs, says Ayeda Tiwa. Stories above the banner. Discos threatens power cut to Aso Villa. Others over 47 billion naira debt. Lastly, on the Nation newspaper, Oyo disburses 500 million naira to 2,078 small business owners. That can be seen on page 5. And the Punch this morning is leading with labor mobilizes for protest. Tanker driver strike triggers fuel queues. Federal government meet drivers. Filling stations short in Abuja, Kano, Ogun. Ipman urges dialogue. NLC adamant, workers vow to join demonstration as Oyo protesters lament hunger. You can see that on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. And stories below, 15 Niger Republic-bound food trucks intercepted in Zamfara. Cement manufacturers list the conditions that to crash spiraling price. Stories above the banner, Aso Villa, DHQ, CBN face disconnection over 47 billion naira debt. Lastly, on the Punch newspaper, Senate asks FIRS to suspend 17 trillion naira tax waivers. That can be seen on page 20 of the Punch newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the daily. Join us after the break for the analysis. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is today the news on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. Joining us this afternoon to analyze the front pages of the dailies is Mr. Dayo Akitobi. He's a publisher of the pages today, Lucky today, and Ikeja GRA today. Good afternoon, Mr. Dayo.
Good afternoon, Madam. Good afternoon to all of you.
All right, thank you for joining us this afternoon. What do you think? This morning we had the rain, the weather change. Nigerians were complaining about the heat, and actually it affected you. So, what do you think about it?
It was a welcome development. I mean, the rain made it really cool. Of course, the downside was there were floods, there was no transport, it was difficult to get to work. But the overall benefit was that it lowered temperatures and made it a bit more comfortable and palatable to bear.
Yeah, and you can feel the fan and the AC very well compared to before.
Yes.
Let's talk about the stories on the front pages, and we're talking about the budget. Well, there are indications that the federal government may be forced to review the 2024 Appropriation Act, as recent development in the foreign exchange market may have pushed the financial absorption in a complete disarray. So the budget, when it was passed into law, the naira then was 800 naira to $1, and now it has gone up by over 50%. So what do you think about this, the fact that the budget might have to be reviewed?
Well, it has a positive side and a negative side, because at the end of the day, I believe when President Tinubu presented the budget, he benchmarked the naira to the dollar at 750. Senate passed it at 800. What that basically means is that the projections in that budget, especially for our export revenue, where we earn dollars from things like oil and gas, when we sell our oil and sell our gas, we get paid in dollars, right? Those dollars are now brought back to the country to service the budget. That's what the government uses for its running cost. So they projected that for this 2024 budget, we are pegging naira at 800 naira to $1. Their revenue projections were based on that. Well, now, of course, we know that the naira has been devalued. Dollar is now exchanging anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 naira to $1. So what does that do? First of all, on the revenue side, it's a positive thing. It means we get more naira for our oil, because the amount of dollars that's exchanging is much more than the 800 they projected. So our revenue is going to go up. That's a positive. That's a good thing. But the other side of the equation is that a lot of our debt is dollar denominated. What that means is that we owe in dollars. So we will need more naira to pay the same amount of dollar we were paying before. We will need more naira to service those debts. And there are other things also that we purchase, that we spend dollars to purchase, that the government uses dollars to purchase. So it's a double-sided coin, whereby depending on how it is managed, I understand that the government is looking at amending the budget to change the benchmark to much higher, so that they can make adjustments where necessary. What is most important is that the extra dollar we will get in our revenue, because, as I say, we get more naira. The dollars will bring in more naira now, because naira is devalued, so you're going to get more. The extra that we get, it should be managed properly. Let's not begin to be profligate and believe we have extra money, because remember, on the other side, we're going to be paying more naira to service those debts. So what we want is a net gain, meaning that by the time we exchange our dollar sales for naira, the extra that we get from there, we will go ahead and spend it all to where we are in a situation now whereby when it's time to pay back our debts, the more naira we need, we swallow up all the gains that we have made from the revenue. So it's not necessarily cause for alarm as long as it's managed properly.
All right, with all of this, the increase in naira has caused the inflation, rising inflation, and now let's link it to electricity. Now, with this, the inflation rate has combined to push the prices of prepaid meters year on year, and Nigerians are complaining that it has gone up by over 80%. Now, even though, especially those who don't even have the prepaid meter, they are complaining some have paid and they've not received their meters yet. And it is like I spoke to a particular neighbor recently who said that in our house we just a fridge and the fan running, she pays as much as 15,000 naira monthly.
Yeah, the problem with the meters really is that a lot of the people who are supplying them are either bringing them in or bringing the components in and assembling them here. So we're back to this whole same situation of the fact that a weak naira means that, or a weaker naira means that you pay more for anything that's imported. So as long as the meters rely on imported components or are actually wholesale complete brought into the country from overseas, it will cost more at this point in time. The thing that is a bit tricky about it is that the government has a free metering program. The government, there's a way you can apply for and get a free meter. A couple of years ago, there was a program, I think it was called IMAP or something like that, where government was actually giving people meters free. What happened was, if your distribution company didn't have any meters on hand and had to go to a third party, because of course the third party are they're business people, they're in it to make profit. If they have to get the meter from a third party, that's when you pay for it. So I don't know what's really going on with that government program that was supplying meters for free, but it looks like for now everybody's having to pay for meters. And just like everything else in the market that's imported, whether it's your imported rice, whether it's your car spare parts, whether it's even fuel that we are bringing refined fuel from overseas, as at this moment, anything that has an import component is automatically going to cost more. So it's part of the continuing pinch on the average consumer that I don't see how meters at this point will not increase in price unless we are producing them completely locally, down to spare parts, down to assembly, down to manufacturing, which we know right now is quite challenging.
All right, let's talk about, still talking about the inflation. Now, let's talk about the protests in the streets of Nigeria, especially that of Oyo State yesterday. Now, some of the traders and the youth, they all took to major streets in Ibadan to protest against the high cost of living. And it's not only in Ibadan. Now, some other states have also protested last week, and some are still picking it up that they are going to protest. But do you think the protest will help in any way? And I'm sure you saw the video that also went viral. What do you think about that video?
Well, first of all, protest is a constitutional right of every Nigerian in a way to express their grievances or to make our voices heard to the government. That is why it's constitutionally guaranteed. As long as there's no violence involved, as long as there's no insightful behavior, protest is legal and is constitutionally permitted. So it is a bona fide tool by which people express their feelings, and it generally sounds a warning to government, because most of the time government is a bit aloof or far removed from the yearnings and feelings of the people. And so when protests speak loudly and they send a resounding message to government, and so it's good for people to exercise the right to protest every now and again when situation seems out of hand and government seems to be immune to the cries of the people. Protest is one way of calling government's attention to the plight of the people. So it's not surprising that at a time like this, when we're going through hardship and difficulty, that people will exercise that right. So I don't see anything wrong with it. And in light of the fact that, like you said, in Niger State and some others last week, they protested, or you did it yesterday, it will surprise me to see more and more states begin to organize this sort of protests to call government's attention. I don't think government does not know. Look at the NLC is already planning a 2-day strike, I think 27th and 28th of this month, for the same reason, to protest low wages, to protest the fact that cost of living is higher than the wages that people earn and people are unable to cope. So I think that government, especially the state governors, since fuel subsidy was removed, we are beginning to see the kind of numbers of money, the savings from the subsidies being shared by the 3 levels of government. But state governments are not doing much at all to address the plight of the people. It's not only the federal government that is saddled with the responsibility of protecting lives and property and seeing to the general welfare of the people. The state governments have a responsibility too, and the governors are getting so much more money now than they used to get in the past from the fuel subsidy savings, that we should begin to see how that money translates into the lives of the people. Because remember, people are closer to their state governments than they are to the federal government. They are closer to the local governments than they are to the state and to the federal. So all politics is local. All governance should be local as well. So the governors need to step up to the plate. I've seen one or two of them give little palliatives. I've seen some conditional cash transfers, 1 or 2 things that some state governors have put in place and are trying to do. But they need to do more, and state governments need to be more involved at this point than just the federal government.
Well, some of them are telling the federal government to reverse the policies. They're telling the president to reverse his policy because it's affecting Nigeria, especially the fuel subsidy. And recently, IMF said that Nigeria is still paying subsidy through the back door. But do you think there are some of the policies that can actually be reversed to help Nigerians live better?
Well, you know that this whole thing started May 29 on inauguration day, when the president, like they said, subsidy is gone, and when he free floated the naira. Those two policies, from some economists that I've spoken to, have said those two policies are good policies overall for the good of the country, but that the timing and the implementation was wrong. Timing and implementation was wrong. That first of all, it shouldn't have been done on the very day of the inauguration. It should have been phased in. Then secondly, some steps, some remedial measures should have been firmly in place and properly structured before any such policy was enacted. So is it the right thing to roll back such a policy? Well, we already hear that the landing cost of petrol today is in excess of 1,000 naira, but we're still paying 600 at the pump. So it means government is still subsidizing fuel. So, and the IMF seems to have confirmed that. So that in a way is a reversal of the policy, but government doesn't want to look embarrassed and doesn't want to look like they didn't know what they're doing or they are incompetent. So they won't openly tell us that we have reversed the policy. But it looks like for all intents and purposes, they have reversed fuel subsidy and they're now paying it again. Now, in terms of this free floating of the naira, can they reverse it? I think they're taking measures to cushion the effect of that, like this thing about remittances into the country now will be paid in naira, not in dollar. Then asking the banks to release their dollar reserves. Then giving people who are holding dollars. There are all kinds of steps that the CBN is trying to take to mitigate the effect of floating the naira. So while it's not an open reversal, it's also in a way trying to lessen the impact of those policies, because they can see that they're having negative effects on the populace.
They're also saying that they're also telling people that those who are just increasing their price and holding foodstuffs, that they should release them. A store was recently closed because of that. But do you think some of these sellers, they will run at a loss if they sell it for the amounts that the government is thinking of?
Well, see, you can't eat your cake and have it. You're either in a capitalist economy or you're in a socialist economy. In a capitalist economy, market forces dictate. Yeah, sometimes you require government intervention, like they did with the fuel, like they've done with grains, like they've done in some situations you require government intervention. But when you are running a capitalist economy, a businessman is free to choose whatever he is free to set his prices wherever he wants to, because he's the one that knows what his cost implications are. For example, each and every person who has old stock now, both fuel, food, whatever, when you ask them that, but how did the naira dollar increase, naira whatever, how did it affect your whole stock? You already had the stock before. Say, how about my replacement cost? If I sell it at the old price, how will I buy another one to bring, because my money will be short? So I have to increase my price even on the old stock. So look, for government to shut down a store and say, well, there are certain understandings that you have to adhere to keep your government licensing in certain types of businesses. If you are running a supermarket and you are selling things that are not subject to price control, as far as I'm concerned, you are free to dictate, to set your own prices. The only thing is, consumers will look at it and say, your own is too expensive, I'm going to go to the next place and go and buy where the price is more reasonable. And you will go out of business because nobody is buying from you. So that's what keeps commerce and trade going, is competition. It's the fact that if yours is 5 naira more, if his is 5 naira more, you go and buy it from the person who's 5 naira less. That's competition. It's healthy. It helps. It keeps prices low. So I don't think governments should wield the hammer, because it has the powers of coercion. Should wield the hammer and say, oh, you as a business person, your charges are too high. Who is to determine what prices are too high? How do you know that business person's costs in terms of buying the item, in terms of even his diesel cost, his petrol cost, his staffing costs have gone up now because his employees can't get to work because transport is high, so he had to increase their salary. Cost of security is high because of insecurity. He now has 6 guards patrolling. So you don't understand the challenges that the business person is going through. So you can't walk into a store and say, oh, last week powdered milk was 6,000, today is now 9,000. How dare you? And then all of a sudden the hammer has sealed the shop. You shouldn't be able to do that because you don't understand. He might say, okay, so if I sell it at 6,000 and the naira keeps dropping, I can't restock because the new one is coming in at 9,000. So how do I restock? If I sell it at 6,000, my money will be short. So I think it requires, as opposed to coercion, I believe it requires moral suasion, whereby you say, look, we're all in this together. We all have to, take a pinch. We all have to take a hit. But what moral authority does government have to ask business people to take a hit when they are buying 160 million naira jeeps and they are taking extra code to go to Dubai for a meeting? They are doing all kinds of things where they are spending money lavishly. So what mouth will you have to use to ask a business person to please, for the sake of the welfare of our people, please for now just try and hold your costs down so that everybody can survive? It's a message that would resonate, that people would respond to, but we have to see you making the sacrifice as well. It can't be that you are living high and fancy and you are asking us to take a cut or to cut our cloth according to its size at this point in time. Everybody has to make a sacrifice, including, especially government.
Mm-hmm. But how can Nigerians help themselves? Because recently there are some things that a particular friend complained to me that on Monday he priced something, I think a part of a car that he wanted to buy. He priced it for 63,000 naira. Now because it was too expensive, he went back on Wednesday. So Wednesday it was 80 something thousand. By Friday he bought it for 95,000 naira. The same thing, same old stock in the person's store.
Well, the best thing for Nigerians today, as of today, don't consider anything too expensive. If you go there today, whatever the price is, buy it, because tomorrow is going to be higher at this point. For now, until government is able to stem this tide, don't put things off, no procrastination. Because if you believe that it's too expensive, I can't buy it, you go back tomorrow, it's going to cost more. So for now, just buy it at whatever price you see it. See, the thing is, as of now, it's not that there's scarcity of products or scarcity of food. The stuff is plentiful, it's available. Problem is the money in our pocket. We don't have enough to be able to afford these things. So that's what we need to address. That's why I don't believe that palliatives or grains, supplying grains from the National Reserve is a solution to the problem, because there's no shortage of food. Food is presently available. It's just expensive to the point that we can't afford to buy it. So that's what we need to address, which I think is what the NLC is talking about. Let's have this protest and let's begin to talk about getting more money in people's pockets.
Let's move to Edo State. Now, some angry youths and women on Monday took over the All Progressive Congress Secretariat along the Benin City Road as they demanded the sack of the state executive members led by acting chairman Tenabe. What do you think about these women and youths protesting and women demanding for the sack?
Well, it's an outgrowth of the primary that was conducted over the weekend to get a candidate for the Edo State governorship election, which is coming up sometime later in the year. And it was a show of shame, really, because when the exercise was over, there were 3 claimants to the crown. 3 different people said they won. And so it was really a topsy-turvy exercise, with each person claiming authority, and the chairman of the state electoral, whatever was Hopuso Dima, he declared one candidate, somebody else declared a different candidate, 3 people. So, however, the party structured the primary, it ended up being a chaotic situation that had multiple outcomes. If it had been properly organized, there should have been unity of purpose and a single declared winner. For there to have been multiple declared winners, whether the others have a bona fide legitimate legal claim or not, which I guess ultimately the party will sort out, or it might even end up in court. Whether they have a bona fide legitimate claim or not, it goes to show that the party is not united, the party is in disarray, the party is not properly organized. And that's why the protest occurred at the party headquarters yesterday. Women, youth, they were all protesting the fact that that a particular one of the three is the proper candidate and should be the one recognized, and the other two should be jettisoned or should not have the same whatsoever. So it just goes to show the party does not have its affairs in order. It was a very untidy exercise, and party and they have a very formidable challenge in Edo State, because remember that the PDP is the incumbent party, so you're coming in as the opposition, which is all the more reason why the house needs to be in order. You need to be united, you all need to come together and make sure you have a formidable candidate that's backed by all of you. You can get out the vote and make a real full-hearted effort to wrest power away from the incumbents. So you don't need this kind of rancor and division and chaos when you are coming in as the opposition and you want to fight to win power from the incumbent. It's not a good start, and I hope APC can put its house in order and manage all these differences properly.
All right, before we go this afternoon, I just want you to quickly comment on this one. So, Olabode works in the zoology department. I was in charge of a lion was actually attacked at Ile-Ife yesterday, on Monday, and he was killed while he was feeding the lion. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that was really tragic. I saw that story and I saw the video, and it was heartbreaking. What is even more painful about it is that he was in charge of this lion since he was born. The lion was born in the zoo 9 years ago, and he's been tending for it and looking after it and feeding it for those 9 years. And I guess over time he believed he had come to know the animal, and the animal had come to know him, and they were familiar with each other because he had raised this thing from the beginning. But the bottom line is, an animal is still an animal. An animal still has animalistic instincts. Whatever may have triggered that animal that day, it did what animals do. That's why they're called animals. That's why they're not human beings. They don't have the power to rationalize things. They don't have the intellect to be able to separate right from wrong. Something triggered it, and immediately its animalistic instinct came out. And you've seen dogs do the same thing sometimes. Dogs that you rear as pets at home, they sometimes too go ballistic and just lose their mind and turn on their handlers or turn on their owners. So in as much as our hearts go out to the families of the family of the deceased, and we pray for the repose of his soul and that he may rest in peace, it should be a lesson to us that we should recognize the fact that animals are animals. There's no such thing as a tame animal. Even if those we consider to be pets, they still have the propensity to revert to their primordial state of nature. God created them as animals, and that animalistic instinct still resides in them, no matter how many years you think you may have trained them, you may have tamed them, you may have made them pets. Something can always trigger in them at any given time. So I would say, we should always be very careful. For example, I saw the enclosure where the animal was kept. I suppose because he was born there, they didn't consider it wild anymore, but it was not defanged. In some zoos, you see they take their fangs out to make them less, they declaw them, defang them to make them less dangerous, but this animal wasn't. In such a case, I don't think the handler should have been in the enclosure with him. Perhaps he should have been on this side of the fence and throwing the food over the fence. I've seen that done in many animal game reserves and in many zoos and things like that, to where the direct interaction is minimal and the handlers have some measure of protection. But I just suppose it's because there was so much familiarity. I mean, it was born as a baby into this man's hands. This man has reared the animal over the years, so there's some level of confidence starts to arise that, okay, this animal knows me, I know it, and we know how to interact with each other. But an animal is still an animal. Its instincts can come back at any time. May his soul rest in perfect peace.
Amen. So let's have this on a lighter note with Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking is Mrs. Mrs. says, you've never told me this story before. You mean you tried a thing like that? You applied a love powder on your face to woo me. So what happened next? And Mr. says, I was just 25 meters away from your house. when it started raining heavily.
Maybe he went this morning. Maybe he went this morning. The only thing I like to do is that the way he rushed off the love potion, he still got her. He still got her. So he didn't need the love potion at all.
At all.
Yes,
It's just so funny.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Dario, for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure is always mine.
Yes, do to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. You can also visit our website www.vanguardnj.com to get more of our top